The winter winds had always been cruel across the northern plains, but that night they felt almost purposeful, as if the world itself were pushing a lonely, fragile soul toward a place where her destiny waited unseen beneath the falling snow. Clara Bennett, widowed at only 26, trudged down the frozen trail with nothing but a threadbare coat, a nearly empty satchel, and a heart so exhausted she could barely feel it beat anymore. Her husband's unexpected death had left her with debts she never knew existed, and in-laws who, without hesitation, threw her out of their farmhouse the moment the funeral ended, claiming she was no longer their responsibility. She hadn't eaten in 2 days, hadn't slept properly in weeks, and by the time she spotted the dim lanterns glowing on the porch of a large, weathered cabin, she was so cold her fingers had stopped trembling. She didn't expect kindness. She didn't expect comfort. She certainly didn't expect that the man who would open the door, Elias Carter, would be the very person fate had silently been shaping her path toward. Elias was a rancher, broad-shouldered and quiet, a man who carried grief in his eyes the way others carried shadows. His wife had died during childbirth 2 years ago, leaving him to raise their twins alone. He had not spoken much to strangers since then, had not looked at another woman fully, had not allowed his heart to consider healing. But the moment he saw Clara sitting on his snow-covered steps, barefoot, shivering, and trying unsuccessfully to wipe the tears from her red-stained cheeks before he noticed, something inside him shifted, not out of desire, not out of pity, but out of recognition. He saw in her the same loneliness that had lived inside him for years. He saw a soul trying desperately to survive, a world that had turned colder than the winter around them. His twins, Oliver and Emma, peeked out from behind his legs, their mittened hands clutching his coat as they stared, with innocent curiosity at the strange woman hunched in the snow. When Clara tried to stand to leave, ashamed to have bothered them, Elias stopped her with a quiet but steady voice. "You're freezing. Come inside. At least warm up before you go anywhere." She shook her head weakly and whispered, "I don't have anywhere to go." Those 6 words hit him harder than the wind. Something old and protective inside him awakened, the part of him that had once promised his late wife he'd always help those who truly needed it. He extended his hand, and after a long, trembling pause, Clara placed her small, numb fingers in his palm, letting him guide her inside the warm cabin where the smell of stew, simmering in the pot, nearly brought her to tears. She ate slowly at first, as if afraid the food might disappear, and Elias watched silently, noticing every bruise of hardship written across her face. When she finally finished and tried to thank him, her voice cracked under emotion, and Elias felt something unlock in his chest. The twins took to her instantly, Emma handing her a wooden doll, Oliver offering a little blanket, both of them studying her with the same open curiosity children naturally possess. Clara smiled for the first time in months, a small, trembling smile that made Elias look away for fear she'd see something unguarded in his expression. Days passed, and each morning she insisted she would leave soon. But her body was weak, and he refused to allow her to walk out into the storms. She began helping around the cabin, cleaning, cooking, sewing small, tears in the children's clothing, and though she moved with hesitation, still afraid of overstaying her welcome, Elias never once asked her to stop. In truth, the house felt warmer with her in it. The children laughed more. Even he caught himself talking more than usual, mostly because Clara listened with gentle attention, speaking only when needed but always with kindness. One evening, after putting the twins to bed, Clara stood by the window, staring out at the frost-covered world. Elias approached her quietly, noticing the redness in her eyes. "I'll leave tomorrow," she whispered. "I've stayed too long. You've already given me more than anyone else would." Elias shook his head slowly. "You haven't taken anything." But she insisted, explaining how she didn't want to be a burden. Then he said something he hadn't planned to say, something that rose from instinct, intuition, and perhaps a hope he had long buried deep inside. "You need a home, Clara, and my children need a mother." The words hung in the warm air, fragile yet honest. Clara froze, her breath catching as she turned to look at him. Her eyes wide with disbelief, fear, and something else, perhaps a spark of hope she had never allowed herself to feel. "Elias, you don't even know me," she whispered. He stepped closer, his voice steady. "I know enough. I know your heart. And I know my children haven't smiled like this since their mother died." Tears slipped down Clara's cheeks, and she shook her head again, overwhelmed. "I'm not someone deserving of a family. I've lost everything. I don't have anything left to give." Elias reached out, gently lifting her chin so she would meet his gaze. "You're wrong," he said softly. "You have more strength than you know, and maybe we can help each other heal." Her breath trembled as she looked at him, as if deciding whether to let hope enter her heart or shut the door forever. And then, finally, Clara spoke the words that would change both their lives. "Elias, I don't know if I can be what you're asking, but if you'll have me, I want to try." His chest tightened, not with sorrow but with relief, with cautious, unexpected joy. And as the lantern light flickered softly, and the snow continued falling outside the window, two wounded souls took the first step toward a life neither of them had ever imagined they would find again, a life born not from convenience or desperation, but from the quiet miracle of being needed at the exact moment when everything seemed lost. Clara woke before sunrise, the soft breaths of the twins still warming the quiet cabin, and for a moment she wondered how her life had changed so quickly, how a stranger's home had begun to feel like a place her heart recognized. She stepped into the kitchen to find Elias already awake, his hands wrapped around a tin mug of coffee, watching the morning light struggle through the frosted window. He looked tired, but not in the defeated way she had first seen him. Instead, he looked like a man trying to rebuild something he thought was lost forever. "Did you sleep well?" he asked gently, and Clara nodded, though her heart still felt heavy with the weight of town gossip and the fear of not deserving the little bit of peace she had found here. As breakfast cooked, the twins stumbled in, clinging to Clara's dress, begging her to braid hair and fix sleeves, and each small touch made her chest ache with a strange mix of joy and guilt. By mid-morning, Elias asked her to help with the animals, and as they worked side by side, brushing snow off fences and refilling water troughs, Clara felt something shift, a quiet ease forming between them. Not romance, not obligation, but a partnership born naturally from shared suffering and shared hope. But reality came knocking again when a neighbor arrived with supplies and offered Clara a look sharp enough to cut through bone, muttering that widows should know their place. Clara's throat tightened as shame flooded her, but before she could retreat, Elias stepped forward, his voice steady as stone. "Clara is family here," he said. "Not a guest, not a burden, not a charity case. Family." The word stunned her. No one had called her that since the day she buried her husband. That night, as she tucked the twins into bed, Emma whispered, "Don't leave. Us." And Oliver wrapped his arms around her neck with a trembling trust that nearly shattered her. Clara stepped outside afterward, the cold wind biting her cheeks, but the warmth inside her was stronger. When Elias joined her on the porch, she finally let the truth spill from her heart. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I've lost so much. I don't know if I'm strong enough to start over." Elias turned to her, his voice low, honest, steady. "You're stronger than you think, and you don't have to start over alone." His words, simple yet life-changing, settled into her soul like embers ready to glow. Slowly, Clara lifted her eyes to his and breathed the answer she had been holding back for days. "If you truly want me here, then I'll stay." Elias exhaled shakily, almost relieved. And for the first time since she arrived, Clara felt not like a traveler passing through, but like a woman finally stepping into the home fate had been trying to lead her toward.